Okay, so welcome everybody and thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching later if someone shared this with you. This is our brain detox class. We are gonna go over all kinds of ways to actually detox your brain. And I promise for my foodies out there, we are not gonna be talking about food. I won't mess with your taste buds. I'm only gonna mess with your brain. You can do your own research on the taste buds and a whole nother class for a whole nother day. For those of you guys who were invited to this class, you have no idea who I am. My name is Jen Weir. I work with Young Living Essential Oils. I'm a platinum leader with them. That really means nothing to you if you don't do essential oils, if you're like, who cares? But people who do Young Living may kind of want to care. But, how do you know this? The fact that I do Young Living Essential Oils is relevant because this is actually what caused me to go on a journey of learning about the brain. Years ago, about 7.5 years ago, we got into essential oils to help my son to support his immune system. And as we did that, we learned really not just a better way of doing health, but we stumbled onto better emotional health. And then we stumbled onto more really just overall family health. And the thing is what we learned is that our health really matters. It helps when our brain is healthy. We can do all the things, all the right things. We eat plant-based. We don't have toxins in our home, and all of these things are on our skin. However, we can still fall ill. We can still be sick. And as we have dove into, my husband and I, more and more into the emotional wellness, we are 1,000% convinced that your physical wellness is really related to your emotional wellness. I just heard a study done from the CDC, and if you're friends with me on Facebook, I just posted it today. But even the Center for Disease Control said that 85% of our illnesses, our diseases, are directly tied to stress. And when I heard that, I thought, this just backs up 7 years of research for me. As we dove more and more into this, more of the emotional wellness, we got further away from really thinking about how to cure, treat, and diagnose everybody that came through our house or that lived with us. What we realized is as we fix this and we fix this, your heart, everything else just fell into place. I became a certified aroma freedom technique practitioner, which is just another modality of releasing trapped emotions in your body. I will say this, that our emotions do get attracted to certain organs. You've heard that term, oh, that took my breath away when I got that news, or I was worried sick. Those types of things. It is science that our emotions are trapped in our organs. And so as we walk through a few of these things tonight, I want you to be thinking about one thing. I want you to think, how would I feel if fill in the blank was better tomorrow? Just think about that. Write that down. Obviously, we're all on the computer. No one can see your paper. Write that down. It's important for us to understand that our physical well-being is directly tied to our emotional well-being. And really, to discount any of that would be foolish, especially when we have sayings like I just mentioned. Before we start and really dive in, I want us to take 1 minute and capture our thoughts. This is biblical, guys. The Bible is very clear about taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And when you sit there and really capture every thought, you become very aware of what's going on in your brain. We have 30,000 thoughts that run through our head every single day. Women, we have probably a whole bunch more, but on average, 30,000. We only capture 10% of it. I think that's where that saying comes that we use 10% of our brain. It's just we only capture 10% of what we think. And so taking time in the morning and at night, my family calls it a brain dump. Taking that time and just sitting for a few minutes, we'll get into it more, but what I want you guys to do now is take 1 minute. This will be useful for us later. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer and just write everything down. Doesn't matter, positive, negative, anything in between. Just start writing. And go ahead and stop. When we do this with our kids, a lot of times they're like, wait, no, I'm not done. And that's okay. That's good. But just hold your thoughts and listen, and we'll get back to this. We mentioned before, as we talked about oils and supplements and food, and, we do all the right things, and yet people just get sick. I'm sure you've seen on social media, folks getting all kinds of nasty nonsense. And you might say to yourself, well, does that mean that all of those things, all those hippy-dippy wellness things, do they really work? Well, of course they work. But the problem is those people have issues in their tissues. That's a fun little saying you can say to yourself next time someone posts, be like, I guess you have issues in your tissues. A Time magazine article showed that happiness, hopefulness, and optimism, contentment, all of these emotions appear to reduce the risk, or at least limit the severity, of cardiovascular disease, pulmonary disease, diabetes, hypertension, colds, upper respiratory infections. And while the extreme opposite, so depression, those types of things, can actually worsen heart disease and diabetes and a whole host of other illnesses. Illness is very real, and accidents happen. If I get my arm lopped off, I'm not going to go, I guess I was just having a bad thought today. I might should just throw an oil on it. No, I'm going to go to the doctor. That's just silly. So accidents happen. However, disease and things that pester our tissues, really, we should stop and think. We need to be aware that the role of our mind and our emotions play a huge, vital part in our everyday well-being. And understanding this relationship, knowing that's what this class is all about, is understanding this can play a huge role in our well-being overall and our longevity. It's only part of the overall picture, but here's the deal. It's the most overlooked. Most people, and in our culture, we're very reactionary. We're very symptom-based. We like to take a something for our something, rather than stopping and saying, what's my day been like? What's my week been like? I think it's really interesting. Again, I'll use social media as an example, but it is now January 9th. And, you see people on social media dropping like flies. I'm like, that's interesting, because we were just around a really big holiday time where people are around families that create stress and tension. I'm going to see my in-laws, and that's super fun. And they're joking about it, and a big surprise, they come home and have some kind of nonsense. Just something to think about. A basic emotion like fear can be described as like an abstract feeling, or as a tangible molecule called adrenaline, or it's a hormone called adrenaline. So fear, we think, okay, it's abstract, but it can also be described as something tangible, the hormone adrenaline. Without the feeling, there's no hormone. Without the hormone, there's no feeling. So when we think about it, wherever a thought goes, a chemical goes with it. I want you guys to look at your paper now and how you wrote down your thoughts. Think about the feelings that go along with each one of those thoughts. Our thoughts are not just little arbitrary speech bubbles. They're actual, tangible things in our body. And remember, there's 30,000 of them at least that course through our mind every day. Just as all of our parts, all of our being interact and work together, so our feelings and our thoughts play a huge role. Generally speaking, we tend to think of our bodies and our minds as separate systems, right? At least I used to for the longest time. And we believe that their function, for the most part, is independent of each other. Yet, I want you to think about this. When was the last time you interviewed for a job? Or you went on a first date with somebody? Do you guys remember those feelings? In either case, you either were really nervous, or maybe you were really excited, or maybe a little bit of both, but you try to appear super calm, super suave, like you knew what was up, and yet you felt yourself probably stuttering, fumbling over words. I find myself doing that if I have to speak on a new topic and I'm in front of people I don't even know, and I'm like, I'm cool. And all of a sudden I'm just like, I think of something abstract, and then it's just a hot mess. And so the thing is it's because it's all in our mind. We might know what we're talking about, but because of those feelings, we're nervous, we're anxious, we're excited, whatever, all of that is connected. So if you remember how you felt, if you felt self-conscious, you all are going to love this. I know my kids do every time I tell them this, but you tighten your butt muscles. So you're literally sitting on your tension. I think that's interesting when you think about it, when you're like, you're so tight. Anybody hasn't pooped in a while, you might want to relax. You thought we were just going to talk about the brain, but we are probably going to talk about poop a whole lot more than you care to even think about. You're welcome. You sweat more. You feel a little bit nauseous, right? All of these things come along with being excited and being nervous. Really, our emotions, write this down, they come from two things or two places. Every emotion stems from either love or fear. And I've had people say, oh, what about anger? Well, it's just because you're afraid of something. Somebody's going to take something from you. You're afraid. If you really stop and think about it, it's either from a place of love, which is only from our God, or a place of fear, which is not from our God. I want you guys to visualize yourself skydiving. Close your eyes and picture yourself on the edge of that plane. The wind is rushing. You're about to jump. What are you feeling? Half of you are probably like me, like, oh, heck no. You probably felt your fingers touching the side of the plane, like, no, do not push me out. I'm too young to die this way, right? That's funny, Christy, you actually did that. The others of you are like, yeah, and you're so excited. And your palms even might be sweaty too, just because you're so excited. For me, whenever I do this exercise and I have people visualize themselves skydiving, I'm not even visualizing myself, but my palms no lie are sweaty because I'm just like, my word, that is not something I want to experience anymore. I'm 44. I'm like, I am too old for that nonsense at this stage of my game. All of these scenarios just are an example of how our emotions affect us physically. Okay. It might be easy to understand that scary thoughts get your heart beating faster. You know, the skydiving thing, if you were afraid of that, standing in front of 10,000 people, whatever. But it can be harder to realize and recognize that loneliness, sadness, and depression can also physically affect us. When it comes to more complex emotions, we tend to think that, well, it's okay, we'll just shove it down. Especially men. I know, Kyle, I think you're probably the only one on here now. I'm just going to call you guys out. I'm married to one, and I'm raising 3 of them. But our culture teaches men, just stuff it. Just stuff it. So if you're totally freaked out, it don't matter. You just suck it up and drive on. I grew up military. That's how we were raised. And that's how many people are raised. It's not okay to do that. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter what the emotion is. If you do not get it out, if you do not acknowledge it and deal with it appropriately, it will affect your tissues. You'll go back to that, having issues in your tissues. Understanding the mind and body relationship may not cure all of our physical difficulties. I mean, I don't want you guys to come back and be like, Jen Weir, I've been journaling and doing all this stuff and I still got this hangnail or whatever your issue is. Listen, it may not cure everything, but learning the language of symptoms and illnesses, we can discover what's being repressed or ignored in our psyche and our emotions and how this is influencing our well-being. From this vantage point that we're going to talk about, we can discover that there's this two-way communication going on from between our bodies and our mind that affects both our physical, our mental, and our emotional health. So here's the thing. We're going to walk through a couple questions. I want to ask you guys some questions, and you're going to write this down. You're welcome to chit-chat about it here, but it'd be good for you to write these down. So what happens to you when you get irritated or frustrated? These are questions you're going to answer. Where do you experience these feelings most in your body? Think about it. Especially none of us are irritated or frustrated now. We're all happy, having fun, right? But think about it. If you drove home in traffic today, where did you feel it? That irritation, that frustration rather. If a client is late for an appointment, you guys, I cut hair for 100 years, and I can honestly tell you, this probably drove me the most insane with cutting hair. It's probably one of the main reasons why I'm like, yep, I'm out. If somebody was 5 minutes late, like I would just get hot, my face would get red. And I want you guys to imagine trying to cut someone's hair when they're 5-10 minutes late, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm so glad you finally showed up, and you're trying to be super nice. It's really hard to get your body back in line with where it needs to be when your mind is like, I can't believe you were so rude and late, right? So think about that. Or for those of you guys who have kids, maybe if they keep interrupting your conversation, where do you feel that frustration? The second question I want to ask you guys is, how does worry affect you? What happens to you physically when you're worried or anxious about something? Perhaps you have a child who's late coming home. If you're like me, I have a new driver, and when he doesn't text me right when he gets somewhere, I'm like, I can only assume you're totally safe at your destination because I did not get a text from you. And it could be like 2 minutes late. That's unreasonable, but what's your response? Fears of the past, even worry, does that creep in? The third question I want you guys to ask yourself is, how do you respond when someone is angry with you? If your boss or your partner yells at you, what happens to your heart, your head, your insides? What do you do with your angry feelings? What happens if you don't express your anger? Do you swallow hard? Do you get a sore throat? Talk about poop again. Do you get constipated? I know countless people who struggle with thyroid issues or throat issues. And if we really dig in, it could be just one time in their life, but very, very likely they weren't heard. They didn't express themselves the way they need to. It may not even be that they weren't allowed to, it's just they just don't know how. The fourth one is how do memories affect you? What happens when you recall past memories? Do you feel warm and relaxed? Or do you break out in a sweat? Pay particular attention as you recall unhappy memories. If you had parents that hit you, if you didn't have a good experience at school. As you think about those memories, the ones that aren't really good, watch where you feel it in your body. And the last question I want to ask you guys is, ask yourself about illnesses or injuries. Think back to a past illness or a time when you were hurt. Note the parts of your body that were involved. I think it's, again, I cut hair for 100 years. I'm a people watcher. And so when I hear folks coming under the weather, like, whatever, they might have, I have this, but all the symptoms are different. I just think that's interesting. And what they categorize as the flu manifests differently in like 10 different people. I watch it in my own kids. My own kids who struggle the most with worry and fear and anger tend to get tummy stuff more often than the other kids. Just something to think about. So use these answers that you guys wrote down to these questions. Use those to understand yourself a little bit deeper. These are going to give you clues to how you can find your healing, whatever the healing is that you're needing. So these are all about emotions and memories and things that come up or have come up. But what about your everyday life? How do we deal with everyday life? Let me give you guys a little bit of info on just every day walking through, and then we're going to talk about, okay, how do we actually move through a brain detox? So research shows that most people complain once a minute in a typical conversation. That's a little fun fact you can write down. So if you are at the office or maybe your kids are complaining, you'd be like, hey, you know what I heard the other day? The average person complains once in a minute during a conversation. And it just kind of stops them in their tracks. Like, wait, was I just complaining? It's really not kind to do passive aggressive. This is the only passive aggressive thing that I'm cool with, and just be like, just going to bring it up in everyday conversation and just let the chips fall where they may. Complaining is tempting, you guys, because it feels good. But here's the deal. There's a lot of things that are enjoyable. Smoking, drinking a whole bunch, eating a pound of bacon for breakfast. It's just not good for you. Just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Complaining, being negative, it's actually detrimental to your health. I grew up in a super abusive family, and my mechanism was sarcasm. That's how I survived. It served me well. It got me to 44 years of age. Here's the problem, though. Sarcasm looks very much like complaining. And so as I've taken this year to watch, actually, it's been almost 2 years now, watching my words, really choosing words that are for my highest good and my kids' highest good and my husband, it's amazing, honestly, how much better I feel and how my thoughts are different. Sarcasm is super funny, but you can be funny without being negative. Trust me, I've worked on it. Your brain loves efficiency, and it doesn't like to work harder than it has to. God designed our brains not to be lazy, but there's so many functions that our brain performs that really, to have to do all these things, it needs to be efficient. When we repeat behavior over and over to just complaining or worrying or speaking positively, speaking life, words of love, or going to the gym, eating healthy food, whatever the behavior is, if we do it over and over and over, our brain has neurons that actually branch out and reach for each other. Neurons that fire together, wire together. That should help you remember that. So it just creates easy bridges for our brain to keep going in that pathway. You know, you might think, well, how do they eat a salad every stinking day? I don't understand how they do that, because they do it every single day. Their brain doesn't know any different. Some of us are wired to be able to just keep being in, I call it a loop. You're just in this pattern. But some of us have a harder time molding ourselves into that. And that's what this brain detox is about too. When we keep repeating the behavior, the neurons will branch out, making it easier. So easy, in fact, you don't even realize you're doing it. So if we think about complaining or being negative, many people who are negative don't realize that they're negative. And that's what's frightening, is they've done it so much, they don't even realize they're doing it. As I changed my wording and I learned about this, I thought, oh, I'm not that way. And I kept thinking about it. I thought, oh my word, yes, I am. The older I got, the more my sarcasm turned negative and complaining and snarky. And that's not good. Nobody likes that. You can't blame your brain though, because here's the thing. Who'd want to keep building a temporary bridge every time you need to cross a river? That's what our brain does. It makes a lot more sense for your brain just to construct a permanent bridge. So our neurons that grow closer together, the connections, they become more and more permanent. Repeated negativity rewires our brain to make future negativity more likely. Over time, you find it's easier to become more negative than to be positive. Reversely, the more positive you are, the more you think on good things, whatever is good, whatever is true, whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, those things, the more you think on that, the more your brain is going to be drawn to it. When we keep being more negative and complaining, even when we're at Disneyland, you will still find something at fault. I don't care who you are. If you do not like Disneyland, I'm just judging you right now. Here we are. That's just how it is. I apologize. But you can be at Disneyland, happiest place on earth. Their sign says it, happiest place on earth, and still find something wrong. The lines are too long. The music's too loud. It's so expensive. I hear people say Disneyland is so expensive. I'm like, oh, Kelly, I'm going to not cut you off this call. Kelly and I have known each other a really long time. You guys need to know. And she's not a fan of Disney, but I know where you live. Here's the thing. when you complain about something like Disneyland being too expensive, it's like, well, yes, it doesn't say Church of Disney on it. They don't claim to be a nonprofit. We shouldn't begrudge folks for making a profit. So you see what I mean? Like if we look at it differently and say, well, of course it's expensive. Of course 5 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for my entire family would cost $60. Of course. That's right. That is exactly how much we paid, by the way. It was a lot. We look at social media. Again, I go back to this because it's really where we all hang out, right? All the sickness. The same folks who were so worried about being sick, turns out they're sick now. What we think about comes about. Here's the kicker. Complaining, negative thoughts, those types of things, they damage our areas in our brain. So Stanford University did a research study that showed that just complaining, not anything else negative, but just complaining actually shrinks our hippocampus. This is the area of our brain, my friends, that is critical for problem solving and intelligent thought. Damage to your hippocampus is frightening, especially if you consider that this is one of the primary areas that's destroyed with Alzheimer's. So as we're doing, all kinds of Alzheimer's research and all of these things, and we're fretting and we're wringing our hands, what do? Stop complaining. It'll help your brain. Our brains are going to focus on what we think about. Our body follows and it creates a reality. So I want you guys to write that down. Think about it. Our brain will focus on what we think about. Our brain doesn't want to take the time. I shouldn't say it doesn't have the ability. It doesn't want to take the time to wonder, is she being sarcastic? Is he kidding? Our brains don't understand joking. So like in our family, when our kids say, I'm only joking, I'm like, no. You're not only joking. There's truth in everything. So if I say, I don't want to be sick, my brain doesn't differentiate the don't want to be. The English language is really funny. It's really the only language that has the verb am, right? If you translate Spanish, it's usually instead of I am hungry, it's I have hunger. That's how they translate it. And it sounds weird to us because we've added all these words. But our brains would be focusing on I, sick. It's very short. It's almost like it thinks shorthand, if that makes sense. So rather, and we'll talk about this if you want to join in my class, Watch Your Words on Thursday night, but rather you would say, I walk in perfect health. My cells regenerate normally. Rather than when you see all these things posted in there, I hope I don't get, fill in the blank, just whatever, I walk in perfect health. Your brain will focus on perfect health, walking in perfect health. And for those of you who might be saying, oh, that's nice, Pollyanna, Mary Poppins, blowing all this sunshine. Listen, wouldn't you be happier believing that you walk in perfect health than fearing? Think about it. Say to yourself, I hope I don't want to say it, you fill in the blank if you want, right? Even just me saying, I hope I don't. Okay, and then if you say, I walk in perfect health, look at your shoulders back. That's right. You have a completely different demeanor when you say positive words. Even just say, I'm so healthy. I'm so healthy. It's ridiculous. I don't know how I have reduced all this weight. P.S., we'll talk about this on Thursday night, but if you're doing any kind of weight management program, don't say, I want to lose this much weight, because what happens when we want to lose something, we have to go search and find it. If I lose money, I'm going to go look for it. If I lose weight, my brain's like, I better go look for it. There you go. Negative thoughts and emotions are bad for our health. It's not an exaggeration to say that negativity leads to brain damage, but guys, it doesn't stop there. When you have a negative thought, your body releases the stress hormone, cortisol. Cortisol shifts you into fight or flight mode. Like it or not, this is one of the functions that your body does automatically. This is for survival. It's only been in the last 100, 150 years that we are not fighting for our lives. We're probably one of the only nations that doesn't have to think about survival constantly. Even in other first world countries in Europe, they're on high alert for terrorism. They're always thinking of survival. I grew up, we lived in Germany for 4.5 years, and I can still remember as a little kid fearing terrorist attacks. And so folks who do not live in the United States are always in fight or flight mode, or it's just a reality. So when cortisol shifts our body into that, it directs oxygen, blood, and energy away from everything but the systems that are essential for your immediate survival. I want you guys to think about that, and it might be good to write that down so that later when you're thinking about somebody just cutting you off and now you're irritated and you're releasing all this unneeded cortisol, is it worth it? All those organs and all those parts of your body that don't now have adequate oxygen and blood and energy, just your heart, your lungs, and maybe your stomach, just for that one person that cuts you off. One effect of cortisol, for example, is to raise your blood pressure and your blood sugar so that you can be prepared to either escape or defend yourself. I'll say that again for anybody who knows anybody with blood pressure or blood sugar issues. Type 1 or type 2 diabetes, by the way. I do not discriminate. So one of the effects is it raises your blood pressure and your blood sugar so that you can be prepared to escape or defend yourself. All this extra cortisol that's released by frequent negative thought patterns impairs your immune system, can make you more susceptible to all those other awful things that we talked about. It even makes your brain more vulnerable to strokes. Guys, it's not just us sitting here. Human beings, we're inherently social, right? That's just how we're designed. Our brains naturally and unconsciously mimic the moods of those people around us. You guys ever walk in a room and you're like, ooh, dang. And all of a sudden you feel a little grumpy, even though you're like, I was so happy. And then I walked in here. Or reversely, if you're like, and you're just kind of in a mood and you walk in and all these Mary Poppins sunshiny people are in there and you're like, dadgummit, I wasn't in a bad mood, but you guys made me laugh. Thanks. Now I'm happy. Right? And all of a sudden you're just happy. Can't help yourself. It's because that's what our bodies do. Our brain, we want to be like the people we're around. I can't remember what it's called, but it is where you're talking to somebody maybe with a British accent and please, I should have been born British. But all of a sudden you're wanting to just be like, a spot of tea, please. And you're wanting to sound really cool like that person. It's just what we do. It's just our behavior. Particularly people we spend a great deal of time with. One of the best things you can do, guys, is detox your relationships. Really detox them. Or at least give them the Heisman, arm's length. This process is called neuronal mirroring. It's just the basis that gives us that ability to feel empathy. On the flip side, it makes negativity a lot like smoking. So if you were around a smoker and maybe you yourself are not a smoker, would you be cool with someone taking a few drags and blowing it in your face? I wouldn't. I would probably go, hey, I feel like that was rude. It's the same thing with negativity. If someone is literally blowing their negativity on you, again, you may want to just step back and say, I'm going to go over here until you fix that. Don't let yourself get sucked in. You need to be cautious about people that you spend time with who complain about everything. That old saying, misery loves company, rings true. If you would distance yourself with someone who's smoking or someone who is literally coughing up a lung, you might want to distance yourself from someone who is spewing their nonsense. So how do we change? I'm going to give you guys 4 simple steps. Again, super simple to help you detox your brain. All of this, I gave you all of this information so that you would know the research and the science behind it. I feel compelled to share this with people, and I'm hoping and praying that all of you listening and watching feel compelled to at least stop and watch your words. Stop and think, rather than go on another diet, rather than go on another whatever. But you detox your brain. And then everything else will fall into place. All right, step number 1, capture every thought. Remember we did this at the beginning of our class. I mentioned the Bible is very clear about this. Best-selling book since forever. P.S. If you don't read yours, I suggest you do. It makes sense then that we would do this every day, even hourly sometimes, minute by minute. I have a 16 and a 14-year-old, you guys. Some of you have teenagers too. Capturing my thoughts is critical as they're chattering at me. Every morning, set aside time to capture your thoughts. Should only take you about 5 minutes. Now, if you're like me, I love journaling. I could sit there all day and just journal my thoughts because I have a lot of them. 30,000, I probably capture all 30,000. But if you're like, I am pressed for time, then set your alarm 10 minutes earlier. Give yourself 5 minutes to splash some cold water on your face and start writing. Set your timer, 5 minutes. Because in the morning, you might wake up negative. You might wake up with, oh my word, it is still dark. Are you for real? Oh my goodness, it's super cold here in Texas. It is cold without a purpose. What in the world? And just all these thoughts. I really want eggs today, but I shouldn't have, whatever your thoughts. And then at night, before you go to bed, like the last thing you do, let's show my phone. Lord, I don't even know where it is. Not play on your eye product, not troll through social media, but capture your thoughts the last 5 minutes before you go to sleep. When you do that, you dump your brain. You get all that back out on paper. Again, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night. When we do this with our kids, we tell them there's no judgment on your penmanship, no worries about spelling, grammar doesn't have to be right, just write. I think this is the biggest issue with adults is that we get all like, oh, my handwriting looks like a serial killer. Fine, keep on writing. It'll look better. Practice makes perfect. Or spelling, who cares? Nobody's going to read it. And if you die and someone reads it, again, who cares? You will never know. So why this works, when you see your thoughts on paper, written out, you can now look at them objectively. This is so key, guys. Look at what you wrote. Do your words ring true? Are they negative? Do they even make sense? I've had people, and maybe you guys have, and unfortunately for them, I know a lot about the brain, and I've studied humans for 25 years. But they will send me, the email or the text, their anger text. I call them like hate mail, whatever. Now we email, we don't write it. And I'm reading this out, and I'm thinking, you probably should have had an editor before you sent this, because none of this makes sense. You sound like a crazy person. Have you guys ever gotten those types of emails or texts and you're like, can we talk about this? No. But when we do it for ourselves, when we write it out, it's like, oh my gosh, I sound like a crazy person with that thought. Like in your head, it totally makes so much sense. And you are so right. Right, MJ? I mean, I see you high-fiving and you're like, yes, amen, I'm a genius. And you write it out and you're like, oh, thank God for paper to be able to be ripped up and burned and thrown away. Okay? So once you see your thoughts out there, you can choose a couple things. You can choose to completely reject and go, oh yeah, okay, I just need to get that out. That's done. And then we can move on to step 2. Or you can look at it and go, yep, that's awesome. Those are all positive. This is all steeped in truth, whether it's good or bad. Sometimes we have to write things out if we're in a disagreement with somebody. We need to write it out and understand maybe, yep, okay, that is absolutely true. This is all in truth. Step 2, choose to flip it. If there were negative thoughts there, just take it real quick and write the positive. We're going to do this again, but in detail for step 3. But for step 2, you're going to rewrite it and just, I feel tired today. Maybe you wrote that and just flip it and say, I'm energized. Just flip it real quick, nothing big. It takes 100 positive statements to wipe out one negative one. You should write that down. It takes 100 positive statements to wipe out one negative one. There's an army saying that has some interesting words, but I'll paraphrase it like this. 1 aw crap wipes out 100 attaboys. So think about that. Next time, either you are tempted to say something to somebody or someone says it to you. If someone tells you your hair looks bad, ladies, I'm sure, Kyle, this does not matter to you. You just throw a hat on. But listen, ladies, if someone says, oh, what'd you do with your hair? The entire day, you're like looking in a mirror like, is it that bad? I don't know. And then you go ask everybody you see, does my hair look okay? And even if 50 of them say, yeah, you look great, that one statement, you have to go find 101 people now that tell you look amazing. Good luck. Or, does my butt look big in these? If one person says, yeah, you look like you got a little junk in your trunk, you're going to burn those pants when you get home. I guarantee it. How many times does that happen to us, right? So as we rewrite the statement, just something positive, be mindful to read them over and over out loud. This is how you create new pathways. Easy bridges. Step 3, you're going to write it out again, but now you're going to rewrite it in a paragraph, in the positive. I had an amazing night's sleep. I feel so energized. I'm excited for the day. I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, Jen, well, you do not know my job that I have to get up to. I don't care. What we're doing is we're telling our brains the truth in advance. Your brain does not know the difference between truth and a lie. I give you Santa Claus. How many of your kids believed in Santa Claus or still do? Hopefully they're not listening. And if they are, then, oh, well, you know where I live. But how many kids believe and hope and look out the window and wait? Y'all, it's a lie, right? I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen him. Been on this planet 44 years. Lived in a lot of countries. But my point is that our brain, if we're told the same thing over and over and over, it'll believe it. So what we're doing here is we're telling our brains the truth in advance, is what I like to say. You're telling your brain the truth in advance. I feel amazing. I had a great night's sleep. Before you go to bed, I cannot wait to put my head on that pillow and get the best night's sleep ever. I'm going to sleep like a baby. Tell your brain the truth in advance, because your brain's like, all right, okay. I don't know. Last night was weird, but she's telling me it was good, but okay. I'm not joking, you guys. It totally works. I mean, it's the same thing when your kids, when they're little, their limbic system isn't fully developed from birth to 2. They always look for the mother for their feelings. So they fall and they look at you like, am I okay? Because they're looking for your limbic system, your emotions. That's why we're like, oh, yay, you're fine. And they're probably thinking, that hurt like hell, but okay. Mom says I'm fine. I must be fine. But if you go, ah, what does the child do? They start bawling like a baby, the baby that they are. That's how that works. Our brains, though very sophisticated, still reasons like we're little. So write out the thoughts positively, a paragraph. A few weeks ago, we had a pastor speak at our church. It was actually, it was New Year's Eve, actually. And I thought it was so poignant. I wanted to share it with you guys. Those of us who know God, and this culture, it's interesting. We say, oh, I know God's faithful, but, and we come up with all the reasons why really we're going to doubt God's faithfulness. I know God's good, but I got this situation. I'm flat broke. All these things. But rather, if we were to say, man, I have this lack, or I have this fear, or I have this worry, but I know God's faithful. And we start praying and we start speaking from the promises of God rather than our problems. I'll say that again because that was life-changing information for my family. If we start speaking from the promises rather than the problems that we have, the promises of God rather than from our own human problems, I guarantee you will look at life differently. You absolutely will. And please hear me, for those of you guys who don't know me, I had a kid with cancer, and it was not a good one. The doctor straight up told us, I said, well, I've heard of worse cancers, or things can turn into whatever kind of cancer. He goes, nope, you pretty much got the worst cancer ever. Awesome. Great. If you're going to get a cancer, get the melanoma. It's the worst one you can get. I had a baby born with the organs outside her body. I tell you guys that just to tell you, I am very acquainted with hardship and trials. I do not say these things flippantly. I don't. Be creative with your process with step 3. If you are like me and you love colors and fun, write all over your journal with different colored pens. Don't even worry about it going in order. Write in a spiral. Do everything that your grammar teacher and your English teacher and your writing teacher would tell you, don't ever do that. If you're an educator, do everything that you would tell your kids to not do. Like, just be rebellious, go against the grain, make it fun. Here's why. When we switch it up, when we get creative with our writing, even just with colors or in the direction that we write, it makes our brain wake up. When you use essential oils, the reason why, besides the constituents in it, but the reason why smelling lemon and peppermint can help you remember is because it sharpens your brain. It's so potent, and it just makes your brain just wake up. And so when we do stuff like this, it makes our brain stop and go, whoa, you're doing something different. When we're driving in the car, that's why studies say you should take a different way to work at least once a week, so that we don't get stuck in that loop, so that we don't keep carving in the same boring pathways. It shakes our brain up. It makes it have to work. It's good for us. It helps us to capture the thoughts and really recognize, really start to try to think of things different. Step 4, just do it. Do it. I mean, Nike made millions off that slogan. There's a reason. Do it. This is a step that our faith manifests into doing something. It's not just a matter, guys, we can sit here for this hour and decide, I want to be forgiving. I want to change my mind about something. But you have to walk in the act of forgiving, of the stopping the worrying, of releasing fears. You have to put feet to it. You cannot just I can't sit here and say, I want to lose 100 pounds and make $1 million, and then just sit here. As it turns out, I have to go to the gym. I actually have to work my business. I don't need to lose 100 pounds. I feel like I'd be like my little Jonah, super tiny. But in any case, I would have to actually do something. Some of you are thinking, oh gosh, we just talked about 4 steps. It took us 20 minutes to talk about those 4 steps. I don't want to invest 20 minutes morning and night. So let's talk about your time investment timeline. Capturing your thoughts takes about 5 minutes. Set your timer. If you are militant and thinking, I don't have time, test me. Try it. I guarantee this will take about 15 minutes altogether, maybe 10 if you're really quick about it. 5 minutes for your timer. And when you wake up, let's be real. How many of you hop out of bed? If you're like me, you might hit the snooze. Again and again. My husband's always like, why do you set your snooze or your alarm for 30 minutes before you actually want to get up? I'm like, because I have a love affair with my snooze button. It's a mental thing for me. Get up, just start writing, eyes closed. Choosing to flip it and rewrite it takes like 1 minute. The quicker you flip it, the quicker your brain is going to catch on. Writing again, that should only take you about 5 minutes. That's it. Detoxing your organs takes time. A lot of people now, again, it's January 9th. Many people are doing some sort of detox. I see all these people, oh, I'm on a water fast. Oh, I'm on the keto, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm on this thing. Listen, that takes time. But if you fix this first, you probably wouldn't need to go on any of those other special diets, whatever. Take the 15 minutes, the 10 minutes, morning and night, to detox your brain, and then just see how your body feels. See how your body feels. Detoxing your body takes a long time. It can take days, it can take weeks, it can take months. We have spent a lifetime building toxins in our brains. I mean, it's made of fat, you guys. Toxins can hang in there. It will take a little bit of effort on your part and investment to completely detox your brain. So as we use essential oils in this process, it makes it much simpler and quicker because of the molecules that are in our oils that will help rewire your neural pathways. Dee Dee, I think this is probably what I said I didn't want to chat about, but I'm like, meh, let's throw caution to the wind. FDA, whatever. But those constituents, the sesquiterpenes and the monoterpenes that are in all of our oils, but just at varying degrees. So if you talk about your cedarwood, cedarwood's the one I know for sesquiterpenes, and frankincense and sacred, they both have monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes, but cedarwood is super, super high in sesquiterpenes, you guys. So if you want to change your brain, spend the $11.25 if you're a member and grab a nice big bottle of sesquiterpenes. Sorry, cedarwood. And you breathe it in, and those molecules, thank you, MJ, those molecules within 20 seconds pass the blood-brain barrier, get to your limbic system where all of your emotions and your memories are stored, and they start working on those pathways. Have your cedarwood, your frankincense, even lavender. Guys, lavender has 3 main constituents: cedarwood, golly, I'm going to need something for my brain, sesquiterpenes, monoterpenes, and phenols. Lavender has all 3 in almost equal amounts. What's interesting is if you hold it at varying lengths to smell it, the lavender will smell differently to you. It's a super fun test. But keep your lavender by your bedside, your cedarwood by your bedside. When you wake up in the morning, just smell it. Get that brain working. Throw some peppermint in there if you want to wake yourself up. As you continually breathe these in, both of those will help to smooth out the old pathways, and they're going to help rewrite miswritten information into our brains. The monoterpenes are going to help clear off junk off your receptor sites. And guys, hear me. If you have junk build up on your brain, your receptor sites, which if you've never walked yourself through a detox process, you do. If you are new to oils, or if you don't necessarily use them all the time, you have junk on your receptor sites. Junk on your receptor sites impedes communication from your brain to all of your organs. So if you have a situation going on neck down, it's very likely that you have junk build up on your receptor sites, and your brain is like, I can't tell your gut to heal itself because you got all this junk built up. I'm trying to help you, and I can't. So sesquiterpenes then will help to rewrite miswritten information in your DNA. That's another class for another day. But it will also help rewrite new neural pathways. It'll help seal the deal, as it were. The oils that are high in frequency. So we go back to cedarwood, frankincense. You guys can Google frequency in oils. We've talked about it. If you're in my oil group and we're oil, we've talked about frequency a lot. High vibration. It's actually a great idea to look up vibration. Everything has a frequency. All your green foods. Oh, I said I wasn't going to talk about your taste buds, but look, just 1 minute. So anything that is not from a box, anything that's not processed, anything that's not acidic, so your meats, your dairies, all those types of things, anything that is not that can actually raise your frequency. It can make you feel better. When our frequency is higher, we have better health. If our frequency is low, we have poor health. Breathing in oils that are high in frequency can raise your frequency. Studies have shown that this isn't coffee, it's tea, but if you have a cup of coffee, just holding your coffee, sad as I might be to say this, will actually lower your frequency. But that same study has also shown that if you breathe in something like frankincense, it actually raises your frequency back up. Food for thought. Okay, it takes 21 days to create a habit, right? We've all heard this. That's just to make it something you think about every day. That doesn't mean it makes it something you will do every day. It just means, okay, I've done this for 21 days. I'm thinking about it. I'm aware of it. It's something I do. But it takes 3 times that amount of time to actually rewire it so that the bridges are now like this. On day 22, day 23, if you forget, those bridges are more like this. They're like, I think we were doing something, but you see, it's easy to get out of the habit. Right now, the gym I go to is packed, pumping with people. I got to elbow my way to get to that treadmill. But on January 22nd, it's going to be like a ghost town. Sad as that is, it's the saddest thing because I want to be like, no, don't leave, stay. I promise you, if you hung in there till March 31st, you're a lifer. You really will be. If you miss it, you will miss it. But on the 22nd day, on the 23rd day, those habits, start to slip away. And there we are. Before we end, I want to give you guys some resources, and I'm giggling at myself. I left them in my room because the way I read. Actually, I have one here. The other one is in my room. But I want you guys to write this down. It's called Switch on Your Brain. This is the workbook. Here's the regular the book. If you're a workbook kind of person, you're going to want this. That is not me. I like this book, Switch on Your Brain, by Dr. Caroline Leaf, Leaf. She's got YouTube videos that you can watch that will dive in. If you are super nerdy, you are going to love her because she has words that are like this long. And I'm going, say what? And she's from South Africa, which makes it real interesting to understand her. But it's a super fun listen. She's incredibly knowledgeable. But she has a 21-day detox, or brain detox plan in here. It's so fabulous. The other book that I don't have to show you, but I can tell you about, is called Vibes by Robin Openshaw. You might know her as the Green Smoothie Girl, Green Smoothie Diet Girl, something like that. But she's phenomenal. That book, I actually bought it for my mom for Christmas. And you know how you do. You kind of thumb through like, oh, is this actually a good book? And I'm looking at it, and then I went and ordered myself and our family a copy. Because it's not just, I thought it was just about high frequency, maybe in oils and positive thoughts, but it's everything. She really dives in deeper than what I shared about your brain and how really your thoughts lowers your frequency, making you susceptible to all kinds of heinous diseases. But even just having positive thoughts can help you in an untold amount of ways, even something as simple as weight reduction, weight management. She has a section on essential oils. She talks about, she uses Young Living oils. She has a couple recipes in the end. And what I laughed at was I was reading and I thought, gosh, her words, she sounds super familiar. And I realized that book, The Green Smoothie Diet, was the first book that I ever read after my son was diagnosed. Because I came home, they were giving us zero hope, just speaking death over him. And I literally Googled curing melanoma with food. And I came up with green smoothie diets. I thought, what in the world? Fine, I'll buy this book. And I'm reading this book. She talked about juicing. And it was neat to come full circle and to see how healthy my kid is and how emotionally healthy he is. And really, it's everything that we learned kind of all nice wrapped up in this little book. So if you guys want to invest some time and some money, I would highly recommend her book. Highly recommend it. It's phenomenal. All right, guys, thanks so much for being with me. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording and ask for if there's any questions.